Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am Tony Lynch. I'm your host, and today, like as always, we got an amazing guest. This is my friend. This is my sister from another mother. We was talking before. We always have a great time. Today, we're going to be talking about you already know child loss, and she has an amazing background. So, but before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this is for educational purposes only. And if you haven't already and this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification. And if you have questions or comments, please put those in the chats. Now, without further ado, I got my friend Anaya here, and she's here to talk, and she's here to tell her story. So you guys sit back and enjoy the conversation. D, how you doing today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing all right. Whew, we
It's
like
it's
I said
been a
we were.
while, right? You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
it has. It has. We have
Yes.
got to set up more time to visit, but I'm always happy to
Yes,
come.
we do.
Yeah, to
Yes,
come
we
share
do.
with
And you
you.
live right here in Colorado, so Santa Fe is really, like we're gonna have to do a road trip. I'm like, hey, I'm on my way because you got some kids I want to bully.
Yes, yes.
So before we jump into your story, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people where you're from.
I'm Anaya. I'm from Los Angeles originally, but I live here in Santa Fe, New Mexico now, and I'm an artist, a grief coach, a homesteader, a homeschooler, and all kinds of things. The list just goes on and on and on.
Well, let's talk about your journey. This is how we originally connected. I've had you on my last podcast to
Hmm.
share your story. So let's talk about your journey, right? How did Dia become who she is right now?
Oh, sheesh. It's a long. The journey has been so long. I really have to say it started in my childhood, honestly, like with dealing with grief and various aspects of grief, with several deaths of close family members that were kind of traumatic, and like being really young, and then my mom experiencing the loss of a husband and having to watch her go through that, and then myself having miscarriage, and then subsequently having a child with a genetic syndrome who eventually passed away as well. So we're coming up on our 10-year, well, we are just past our 10-year anniversary of her death. And so, like, it's just been like unreal. Honestly, like, I
Yeah.
still have a hard time describing the experience, even though we're kind of, far out from it. She's been dead longer than she's been alive, longer than she had been alive. And so
Right.
that uh, kind of does a number on my mental state sometimes, because I'm like, did I imagine this happening to us? Or, you know, so the fluctuations of emotion are pretty intense sometimes. And I'd say this 10th year has been like a real roller coaster for me in particular. So, you know, you know how it be.
I'm already knowing. Look, we talked about it. Child loss is one of those things that it really has no name for it, right? There's no real
Mhm.
description for the loss of a child.
Right.
For one, for me, and I think we talked about this before, it always feels as if things are out of order, right?
Ooh.
Our children are supposed to outlive us.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have someone ask me what it was like. I pretty simply put, I just told them it's like having a blank piece of paper and not knowing what to write.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a
Mm-hmm.
pain that I don't wish on anyone. And unfortunately, we are in this category, right?
Yeah.
And we both have experienced some losses,
Mm-hmm.
various losses. Nothing compares.
Like,
Nothing compares.
Yeah, I can't describe most of the time like what's going on the inside. You know, a lot of people
Hmm.
will think that we're just happy, we're moving along. And of course, we do have an incredible life, but that's something I have to work for every day. So, goodness forbid I'm depressed or feeling anxiety or feeling panicky, or if I'm having flashbacks and the PTSD that comes along with it. And again, like I said, people really want us to say, "Oh, we're fine now that it's 10 years later." I'm not fine.
Right.
I'm not fine. and
No.
and I don't know how to be fine with that. I don't know. I don't know that there's a world that I can be in that's okay like that. Sure, I'm living. Sure, I'm doing incredible things with my living children. Sure, sure. All of that is true. And the other thing is also true. I'm devastated like all the time.
Hmm. Well, people don't really understand. Well, the grieving process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about your grieving process in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning and what it looks like now, because for some odd reason, there's people out there that think that there's a time limit when it comes down to the grieving process, especially after the loss of a child, right?
Right.
And admittedly, so there are some losses that the grief becomes a little bit more easily to handle than
Yeah.
others, right? Loss of parents. We
Mm-hmm.
we kind of have this mixed up reality that that's the way it's supposed to be. So it's a lot easier to accept, right? We
Yeah.
and it's not so. Loss
Right.
of a sibling,
Right.
depending on the relationship that you have with that individual,
Mm-hmm.
would determine how that grieving process is. Now we both know that the grieving process when it comes down to loss of a child is similar, but it's a whole lot worse, right? Because like you said something. It's as if you're living in a fantasy world, right?
Yeah.
But you have this never-ending nightmare where it tends to get blended with the reality, like especially over a period of time. You got 10, I got 8 years now, going on 9, and I still sometimes I swear if I didn't have a picture of my boy, if I didn't have a picture of him, I
Yeah.
would think that it never happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's that emptiness inside of me that's going, oh man, it did happen, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about the grieving process.
Ooh, goodness. That's such a great question, and you are right. There's so many people really just think like you're going to be done within a certain amount of time. Um, my grieving process looks very different from when I started. When I started, it was just more of like, kind of regurgitating like all of her life, like all the time, or like looking at
Hmm.
pictures all the time, or sharing pictures all the time, and like just to make sure that I didn't forget. That was one of my biggest fears, is that I was going to forget her, um,
Hmm.
or forget everything about her life. And so like I'm the only person who knows her life from start to finish, from like gestation to the day that she died, like holding her body in my arms. Like nobody else has that experience with her at all, not even her father. So you know um this grief is like in my bones. It's in my bones, and it's somewhat unshakable. And so finding ways to assimilate and to continue with life, and to continue with like reinvesting in this, even with there's horrible things going on in the world still. So that like is on top of the grief too. So it's like, Jesus, do I want to keep reinvesting in this? That was always a question that I had to ask myself. um and I did that through writing, I did that through dance, I did it through art, I did it through creating things. And so you know moving the grief kind of through my body. I can't shake it from my bones, but I can keep it from being stagnant. I can keep it from, and that's
Hmm.
the thing that I had to learn, is that it's going to be there, but I need to learn how to move it. and I need to learn how to move myself with it and not push against it, because pushing against it for me was like not talking about it. Pushing against it for me was not allowing other people to bring it up, or not looking at her pictures, or, what folks tend to think would aggravate the grief was comfort for me. I look at her every single day. Because, like you said, if I didn't have those memories of her, I would think I was imagining this whole entire thing and that I'm crazy,
Yeah.
you know? So, um, I've learned a lot of new skills, and every skill that I have, I've kind of used it to process my grief. And so everything to me, anything that you can do is valuable in processing your grief. So it's not just, oh, you got to go to therapy, and oh, you've got to go to a grief group, and you've got to go, primarily we are alone in our grief, and we can,
Hmm.
and it's unique to us. So it's figuring out who you are as a person, re-evaluating everything you know about the world. Like, there's so much that goes on in grief that I don't think that there's a lot of conversation happening about, among those who aren't in our position. So, I think
Hmm.
Adventures of Grief Girl, that's kind of what it's for. It's like, these are the things you need to be thinking about. And I know it sounds morbid. I know it feels like you're gonna die, but literally that's kind of what you do. You do die, and you live to tell about it.
Yeah. Now, I love that analogy, like you do die, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a difference, like you lose a lot of yourself, right? And and those who don't understand, I'm thankful that they don't understand, you
Yeah.
know, um, because again, it's one of those things I don't wish on anyone,
Mm-hmm.
and being in the world that we're in, we are now surrounded by others just like ourselves, right? And we all have that look in our face from time to time as if we're looking in a faraway place, searching, searching
Yep.
for that little grass of reality that tells us we're not crazy,
Mm-hmm.
right? This did happen. But then on the
Mm-hmm.
other side, you're looking for someone to tell you that this is a bad dream.
Yeah.
Like you're going to
Like,
wake up one day.
when do I get to wake up from this?
Right, right. Now, I have to ask, how did the relationships with friends and family change? Because a lot of times when people don't understand, they walk away from us. And you hit the nail on the head where you said, you know, it's a lonely road, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grief is such a lonely road because it's such an individual relationship that you have with it. Family and friends, they want to be supportive. Now, in some cases, I've talked to people where family is still there trying to support and things like that. In some cases I've talked to where family just said it's too much.
Yeah. Um.
They left.
Yeah. I think, gosh, everybody's relationship with grief is very different. And so,
Hmm.
culturally, so if we are looking at it culturally, if we are looking at it with what's within your own family and your relationship with certain people in your family, like, I think that has a big part to play in it. But, for speaking from my own experience, gosh, I've lost so many people, and not to anything that was malicious. Like, there was no drama. There was just, I'm doing something that they can't bear to witness.
Mm.
And they don't know how to articulate that either. So the phone calls stop coming, the text stop coming. Um, you know, it's too much for them to listen or look at what I'm doing all the time. Um,
Mm.
so the compassion sometimes isn't there, and they just, again, like, they just disappear. And it's not like they don't give a reason, they don't give it. So we're left with, like, thinking, well, did I, or it's those secondary losses. So, people can't really put their hands out if they don't know how to hold you. So, um I have noticed, like you said, there are people just, they wander off and are like, this is too much for me, but they can't tell you that's too much for them because that would be rude. Or some people do. They just, this is too much for me and I can't handle it. And they do just make an exit. I, so again, like siblings, parents, like
Yeah.
cousins, all of them, like there, I have very little support as far as my own family is concerned. And, friendships have changed with some folks. Like I have a friend who very often will hesitate mentioning my daughter. She knew her. And so I'm like,
Hmm.
we're 10 years in, babe. If you don't know that you can mention her by now, I don't know what to tell you. Because we find ourselves a lot as grievers taking care of other people's perception about our grief, other people's grief about our grief, other people's feelings. And that's
Mm.
one thing that I'm really tired of doing. Like, don't listen. I don't have the energy for that. Not that I don't even have the time. I don't have the energy because I'm busy surviving myself. Surviving myself, surviving my PTSD, surviving, my anxiety and depression. So, like, Google is free. And there are so many people right
Yeah.
now talking about how to help grievers. Let's get it, y'all. Let's get it. Like, we could do this. We could do hard things. And so, you know,
I think in a lot of places, um, we have to look at the people that are saying that, right? Like
hmm
we have information out there, and for all the right reasons, right? But there, I have seen some where I've sat in on seminars and I've listened to people, and they said some things where I'm just like, yeah, I probably wouldn't say that. And this is
right.
coming from a male's perspective, right? You know what I'm saying? Where I'm
hmm
listening to it and going, yeah, that can be taken out of context, and they go, what do you mean? So and then this is, and we've talked about this, perception versus reality,
Yeah.
you know and then when I find out this individual's background, now they have good intentions
hmm
but a lack of experience when it comes down to that. And you notice the ones that who have the lack of experience versus the ones who do have the experience. Their conversations about their approach and everything is totally different.
right.
Totally different. And so, I'm always doing research. We've talked about it, and I don't want to get too far into the program that we're going to be putting together, but I think it's something like that, right? You know what I'm saying? Where it's going to change the dynamic of how we show up with grievers, right? How we
Right.
walk with individuals, because everyone that's involved have a personal relationship with the grief, and they've experienced it from every aspect, what I'm saying, if not multiple aspects. And I think that's going to be honestly in my heart, I think that's going to be the example that we set for everyone else that come behind us, right? Like, nah, we doing this the right way, right? But a lot of times, again, no offense to those that are out there doing it and they're doing their best for what they have to work with. I say do more research, especially if you've never experienced anything deep.
hmm
Surround yourself with people who have that can educate you the right way, because there's the do's and don'ts,
Yeah.
what to say, what not to say.
Right.
We know.
Yes. Very intimately, we know. Like, I just, it's so and I can laugh about it now, but like I spent a lot of time being really offended, you know? Like I did. I
Mm,
spent a lot of time being really offended. And I think too, that was one of the things that encouraged me to start Adventures of Grief Girl. That was and I found myself, I'm like, I want to be a support for grievers. And at the same time though, we're gonna need to put some things out there to support folks who are supporting grievers
mhm.
because more often than not, we find ourselves in spaces where we're surrounded by people who aren't going through what we're going through. And there's, our little group of people that we talk to that get it, like
Hmm.
our group, our folk. When I call you, I don't have to explain the things that I say. I can just say what I have to say and we work through. But when in other spaces we are finding ourselves like tiptoeing around, ooh, I can't, I can't really say what I want to say because y'all aren't going to take this very well. That's, it's going to sound, I know how it's going to sound because I remember when I wasn't grieving. And I remember
Hmm.
when I had space to hold for other folks. But now my space is crowded with my own grief and I got to make room for other people's grief. I have to
Yeah.
actively like make room for this. Like, oof, so
I think
it's
that
crazy.
comes with the territory, though, right?
Absolutely.
That
Yeah.
that does come with the territory because if you look at before and after, look at the work that we do, the transition, the transformation that we had to go through in order to get to where we are,
Mhm.
and I often sit back and I watch things, and I also listen because I like to just pay attention, be observant, because a lot of times when I'm around people, it's still I still have a hard time being around my friends with their kids, but I
Mhm.
go around them because those kids, although I am grieving, they still look at me like Uncle Tony,
Right.
right? And I want to show up for them because, for one, I have to look at it. Well, I don't have to. I choose to look at it from a child's point of view. You know, I'm a reminder of the relationship that they had with my child,
Right.
and being someone who works with men, I often forget that there's children out there that feels things in a different way, right? They're still processing it, even though it's been multiple years. And this is really interesting. I got into a conversation with a kid that knew my son.
Mhm.
Now, mind you, it's been going on 9 years now, right? And this is the reason why I said, you know what, I still want to show up with these kids and everything. And the little girl, her and my son, if you would have saw them together, they would have been together for the rest of their lives. They were
Mhm.
like two peas in a pod, right? You know what I'm saying? Every time I turn around, they all together. I was like, oh my God. And I've talked to the parents and everything. And I was actually, what was I doing? I was doing some personal training with a client. The client knew the family, and
Mhm.
so the little girl found me and she goes, oh my God, it's you, right? And she's still young and beautiful as always, right? Saying, a little sweetheart. And
Mhm.
she comes up, she just gives me a big old hug, and I bend down, and I'm hugging with her and everything. She just starts crying.
Yeah.
During that conversation, I realized that she was still hurting,
Yeah.
but I also realized that there are other children that, these are things that we often don't think about, though, right? Because
They
we get so wrapped
remember.
up into our own grief. Yeah,
Right.
they do remember,
They remember.
and
I
they just don't
have
have
a
the
little.
words to express.
Right. I have a friend whose daughter sends me a message every year, either on Christmas or my daughter's birthday, and that was her friend. And like I've been able to witness them growing up, and that is to a trip for me because it's like, geez, that's exactly what she should be doing right now. That's exactly what I was preparing for. This is what I lost, and so like
Mm,
we're all like in this space of like they're telling me how much they miss her, and I'm like, whew, I do too. And then they're also living and doing and having beautiful fun. And I remember very specifically them taking such good care of her when she was in school with them. And so, I it doesn't stop. It doesn't dissipate like folks think. I watch them
yeah,
because a lot of I get to dream for a moment about what she would be doing. And so they kind of, serve me in my grief too, because they are still here. And I'm so thankful for them. And I'm every day like rooting for them to win, like, like I would be rooting for my own kid.
Yeah. See, that's powerful because I couldn't have said it any better than that, and I see the tears coming. I'm trying to hold back mine. You
I
better
know,
stop
like
that, man.
I just
You
couldn't
got me
hold them
already.
in
But
that
no,
time.
it's not a bad thing. No, but it's not a bad thing, right? It just shows um, that we're still grieving. It doesn't
Yeah.
go anywhere. For anyone that's out there listening that and they can relate to it, they're probably doing the same thing right now. They're probably shedding those tears, probably reminiscing on what we just said, right? Um, and it's a journey. It's a process that you have to go through, and it does not stop. Like you said, it does not stop. And the thing about it is that we the children that are affected by that relationship that still keep in contact with us,
Yeah,
right? It gives us it doesn't give us hope, but it let us know that you know they still remember, and that's
they
a
remember.
beautiful thing, right? They still remember the relationship. They still have the
Yeah.
memories of playing together and all of these different things, and that honestly it brings a smile to my face, but it also hurts my heart because I cry and I'm thinking to myself like like wow, my son should be here with you. Y'all should be out
Oh,
playing football or playing soccer, climbing a tree, getting yourself in trouble. Like
right.
there's times where I wish my son was here so he can be getting in trouble right now, just so I can go, Bubba, get yourself together, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Get it together. Yep.
I so long for that. You know,
Yeah.
I do. I still long for that. And
I
now I
same.
want to go ahead.
I was just gonna say same, and my living children. I'm like, gosh, I really wish I didn't have to holler at you. So that's like two places at once. Like you're wishing for one to be in trouble that you could be telling about things, and then
Mhm.
there's this, gosh, I'm so tired of hollering at you. Could you just get it together? And
I know
so
it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, you're like, you know what, I'm about to whip your little butt. On the other hand, like, I wish I could be here to yell at them right now.
right,
Um,
and
it,
you know, and I too, and I think forward, and I'm really not gonna miss that hollering part. I'm not gonna miss that. I don't really miss that. Like I miss the person, and I miss
yeah,
that we don't have the experiences together. I miss that you know,
right.
like I should have a 15-year-old almost. I should have, we should be doing college preparatory work, thinking about that, thinking forward about where you're going to go for college or whatever you're going to do, not necessarily that we're just going to push
Hmm.
college on you, but what you going to be doing. And I don't have that, but I also am doing that with my living children. So it's that, but it doesn't, it's not a band-aid.
No,
Yes, I'm having the
it's a wound.
experience, but it's not a band-aid. It's not her. It's not her. These are different people.
Yeah, different personalities, different
Hmm.
characteristics. You
Yeah,
know,
these are
um,
two
and
completely different
I get
people.
that. Now I have to ask. How was the relationship with the father?
Hmm.
Right? How was the relationship with the father after, before and after? And because a lot of people don't, being a male, I could tell you that there's been a lot of things, coming from a male's perspective that people had expectations
Mm.
of how I should move through this thing, right? Until I prove to them that no, I'm not going to follow your rules. I'm going to do what I have to do. But
Yeah.
also, there was a side of me that I had to fight, which was the anger, because as you know, when people have conversations, they tend to say some things that can be taken very, very personally.
Yeah.
And I had to
Yeah.
back myself up like, you know what? I'm about to throw punch you in a way that is really going to suck. Okay. But then there was the side of me that was going, I had to think about it and look at it from another perspective and go, I get it. I do. I get it. You're doing the best that you can
Hmm.
with what you know. So yeah,
This.
how was that
Um,
relationship?
so we're still married, and we've we're about to be on 20 years. So, uh,
Mm.
and
Congrats.
we lost her at our halfway point. So we were already together for like 10 years when we had her, or when she died. I'm sorry. Um, so his process is completely different from mine, and it
Hmm.
in the very beginning it was me sucking up all the air in the room with my grief, and like, because I have a lot of experience with grief in general prior to losing her, it was, I kind of already knew what I what to do. Even though I didn't know how
Right.
it was going to get done. I didn't know, what I just knew that I had to face my grief, and I couldn't just put it in my purse and keep on going.
Right.
That's not how I am just in general. Like, I have to emote. I have to. Like, it's just my process, but his is so different. It's everything's internalized. And I don't want to really speak for him and how he processes grief. I really wish he would have been able to come visit with us today, but maybe next time so that he
Yeah.
can speak more for
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
Um but it heavily impacted our relationship because I was so forward with my grief, and he was so internal with his grief. And there was a lot of
Right.
times that I didn't know what he was going through. He wasn't very verbal about it, and he was dealing with it in his own way. And of course, it did affect us, but it was like in these passive aggressive ways, and it was in these passive, like, I have to understand that he's grieving, but I also. And like, could you just go to therapy without trying to force
Oh,
things? And so, and you know how it be.
right.
And I'm not, I'm not here to shit on anybody for how they choose to go through their grief. But when you're in a relationship, you have to really kind of tune in, and you have to be very aware and be very gracious a lot of the time, because you don't want to make any long-term decisions on any, or any irrational decisions right away. um
Yeah.
you know I feel like he felt more optimistic about how we were going to go along, or go forward with our loss. He was more of like, it's going to make us stronger partners, and I was sitting there like, bruh, did you just experience the same shit I experienced? Because I'm finna die. I'm finna die. This don't have nothing to do with you being a good person or a bad person or anything like that. It wasn't about him and his thought process about it. So I was just like looking at him sideways, like, did we just experience the same thing? Cause woo child.
Yeah.
And so,
Ooh.
and again, right now I can laugh about it because we have been through so much, and we have been um doing the work, whether I want to acknowledge the way he's been doing the work, but I have to acknowledge the process or the progress that he's made as a person. But
Hmm.
what I had to do ultimately was leave him to it and hope for the best.
You know what? That's I understand that right there, right? Just the way that you put it out there, you had to leave him to it and let him and hope for the best. Because a
Mhm.
lot of times, and this coming from a male's perspective, this is unfamiliar territory. The emotional aspect of it, we internalize a lot of things. So, and I love the fact that you was trying to, suggest, hey, maybe we should go to therapy. Look, I got told, I got introduced to a therapist. This is what deterred me from going to a therapist.
Mhm.
People's like, we have this, I was going to church at the time, and the pastor was like, I want to introduce you to this counselor and everything else, right? So I meet her. Nice lady. I don't take nothing away from her. I'm sure she's great at what she does. Um, but I asked one simple question. I said, how do you know what I'm going through? Her
Mm,
words to me is what actually turned me away from therapists. She goes, I've never lost a kid before.
mm,
I said, then there's nothing that you can teach me. No offense to you, none whatsoever. But don't try to counsel me. Do not try
yeah,
to counsel me.
yeah,
Because for one, this what I'm going through, I don't even understand.
yeah,
This pain that I'm in, there's no prescription for. So as you said, I kind of put myself in a situation to where I had to one face it, right, head on. No matter
mm.
what happened, I had to face it head on. And to be honest, I almost didn't make it.
Listen,
But two, yeah, yeah, yeah. It was you look, we all know, right? You know what I'm saying? The when it comes down to it, that process, the bad decisions, I didn't even understand it. And then finally I was just tired. I was like, I don't even know how to fight this anymore.
yeah,
And there was so many nights, so many nights,
hmm,
curled up on the floor, just wishing the pain would stop, crying my eyes out, things that I was ashamed to tell people,
mm,
right? Here I am, I got this king size bed, and I can't even lay in the bed. I'm curled up in a corner, and feeling ashamed
yeah,
because I'm curled up in the corner, right?
mm,
But I was doing it in the privacy of my own home. Like there was so many nights I was just like, oh my God, right? Just curled up, just bawling my eyes out, wishing, praying that someone would come and tell me, hey man, get up. You know what I'm saying? Go get your boy. You know what I'm saying? He's at school, go pick him up. And it never came. And I just remember having this feeling of disappointment that it never came. And then over the period of time, the fighter in me came out, right? The fighter said, no, we not being whooped by this, right? You know what I'm saying? Get up, let's get up and let's get to throwing some punches.
yeah.
Look, I don't know how many punches I threw, but I know there was nobody to catch him. All right, you know what I'm saying? I was
Woo!
like, yeah,
Yeah.
no one was there to catch him, right? And I know you can relate. We've talked about this on some
Yes,
different level type stuff, man. And you know exactly what I mean. Putting on them
I do.
boxing gloves, and you know what I'm saying, and just going to town. You know what I'm saying? Every which way but loose, you throwing punches, and when you realize that there's nothing there,
Right.
right? There's a
Yeah.
there's this tiredness that comes across you,
There
and
is.
it's just like, how do you survive something like that?
How? How do you survive
How?
something like that? And I have, had to reconcile. It ain't for me to know how.
This is true.
It ain't for me to know how, because, I spent a lot of time beating my head against the wall. Like, how? And then,
Yeah.
it's all I need to know is that I will. And then I have experienced those periods of exhaustion. It's like, I would rather be dead. I'm done doing this. I'm done doing this. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And
I think if people really understood the work
saying
that
that out
comes along
loud,
with it,
like,
it's
is a big
hard.
deal because I
Hard.
know
And look, I got virtual hugs for you. I got virtual hugs for you. We're right there,
all of them,
and
all of them. And
yeah,
that's the thing. If I want people to know anything, is that every single day it's a choice. It is a choice. It is an active choice.
mhm,
Like, I have to fall in love with something. I have to fall in love with someone. Whether that's
mm,
myself, what I'm doing, my kids, my spouse, my animals, all the things. It's like, in setting myself up for, love in general, is, I think, what I have been guided to do. Um, so I
Hmm.
have to find something that I enjoy about my kids every day, which, my kids are spectacular, and I can, they they can, on their own, they're spectacular, but I just have to find ways to give them opportunities to be spectacular all the time. So that's finding things for them
Hmm.
to do, finding ways for them to express themselves, allowing them to express deep disappointment over trivial shit is really difficult, because I'm like, listen,
Hmm.
and so I have to find myself monitoring how I speak to them with regard to their big feelings, with regard to their big feelings about things that I know really in the long run don't matter. And,
Right.
we be looking at them like, I wish you would stop doing that. Like, life's really tough out in these streets, and you can really go ahead and just, and so, um, the work, and everybody's situation is different. So there are some people who don't go on to have more children, who don't have, you know, that impetus to say, yes, I want to continue to be alive, and I love being alive.
Yeah.
And we can't ignore
Yeah.
that. And like, even when people do have spectacular things to be in love with, that the possibility is that they're just not invested in this life anymore, and they don't care what happens next, you know?
Yeah. No, yeah, I can definitely understand there because I was there for a very long time. But in reality, it really wasn't a long time,
Mm-hmm.
considering how long I've been doing this work. Hasn't been very long, but although reality kind of slowed down for me, although the world was still turning, life
Yep.
was still going on. I think my grief slowed me down and just made it seem as if it was a lot longer than what it was, right?
It's
And I
like
was just
the
like, whoa,
vortex. Yeah, it's like the
yeah, yeah,
vortex.
yeah,
And
yes.
time becomes this really crazy experience. Like, you know, it becomes this. I feel like it was yesterday. And I feel like do y'all know how long forever is? Because, you know, I don't
I think
know.
we feeling that.
If I could do this forever, forever, ever, Lord, hey, you playing, right? This is a joke. Like, I don't, zero
Yeah,
stars. Do not
right.
recommend.
But see, I think that's what makes you. I think that's what makes you such the amazing person that you are, right? Because you get it. You get it through your words and the vulnerability that you're showing right now, and which leads into Grief Girl. The Adventures of Grief Girl, right?
Mhm.
How did that come about? Because we go through this transition of hurt and everything, and I know my reasons for doing it. But I want to ask that same question. You know, how did that begin to manifest itself into the world today?
So I have always been an artist, and I've always created in some form, whether that's poetry, whether that's singing, dancing, creating, doing theater shows, or being in a band, or whatever. And we process things through art regardless. Artists know this.
Hmm.
And before, I was just going along doing my life, mothering, and I wasn't doing a lot of art. It was intermittent, so I gave up a lot to have kids, and the sacrifices that we make to have what we want to have. And
Right.
so that had always been brewing for me. In general, I wanted to make something, but I didn't know what I was going to make, or and I didn't know how I was going to make it. I feel like I'm
Right.
always heavily guided to do what I do. I've always been put in
Mm,
position to create what I create. So I'm really glad that I had the wherewithal to see it. Um, it just kind of came to me one day when I was sitting around writing one of my blogs for uh, just myself. It was my parenting blog that I would talk about losing a child through. And I knew that I wanted to make something else and I wanted to help other people. My life has basically been about service. I've always had some sort of volunteering that I did to give back to the community. Um,
Mm.
so I've always been really service oriented anyway. So I went on to just dream about like what can I give to folks that would help them understand what it means to lose a child. And then um, I would always say I'm full of adventure. I'm always down for some sort of adventure. But this adventure was more of like, ooh, a true adventure. Like, there's not all good
Mm.
things that are happening on this adventure, and you have to figure out how to get through these obstacles that are presented to you. I used to read, well, I read a lot, but I like adventure stories. I like magic stories. I like, all of these, fantasies and things. And one of my favorites is Lord of the Rings. And if you have seen it, it's an epic adventure. They're having war, folks is dying, and but there's also intermittently some really amazing things that are happening. People are coming together who are strangers. They don't really know each other, and they got each other's back. And that's kind of how it's been with this grief adventure. Like, I have depended more on strangers than I have my family. And, a lot of people
Wow.
are out here on the internet saving my life almost every day. And so I'm like, let's give some room to that. Let's give other people opportunities to do it. And then I used to work for the circus. And so we were already, I was already in position to be doing art anyway. And then I was invited to Meow
Okay.
Wolf, which is this really beautiful installation here. It's interactive, and I had a character that I created, and it was grief. And there was this mask that I put on. The first day it was blank, and then when I went into the house, it's called the House of Eternal Return. All I could see was like, this is my house. Like, this is my house. They had music. They had this really dark atmosphere about, like, there was some story that you had to figure out while you're walking through this house. And being this character was like, oh, yep, this is my jam. I get to wear a grief mask. So while other people were wearing the I'm happy in the world mask, I'm wearing the most, dark and horrifying shit you can think of, and walking
Yeah.
through this place portraying this silent character. And then that's where I was like, this is really cool. And people were responding to it, and I was like, oh. So I started test running other characters in the house, and like it just started to grow from there. And then I started doing large installations in town. Like, we went to the cultural museum and had Grief Actually exhibit, where we, kind of brought to life these big rooms. So a bathroom where I filled the bathtub with fake ramen noodles and had people sit inside of it, because that was what I was eating at the time to stay alive. I was not eating a lot of food, um, but I was eating ramen,
Yeah.
a cup of noodles, and a Dr. Pepper. So I had something and some sugar to keep my blood sugar from tanking. And I had a little bit of energy to do what I was going to do. And I called it depression food. And it was in the bathroom. So it's not where you think you're eating your food at. But like, I have to kill two birds with one stone. I got to take a bath and I got to eat. And so that's what I was doing, basically. And people got such a big kick out of getting in this bathtub with these noodles, and like, from my perspective, looking at like, wow, this is really wild. This is what you were, this how you was living. Damn. And this is the stuff that nobody saw. This is stuff that nobody saw me
Mm.
do, you know and I had some friends join me. Like, there's some really other incredible artists who would draw portraits out of words. And one who was in a body bag basically the entire exhibit. They were laying under a glass coffin, and nobody knew it was an actual person. So we just came together and you know started talking about grief. We had a death cafe. We had a friend of mine who makes incredible cakes. She made grief food for us and had a little had a little
Mhm.
setup, like a little pastry shop set up with grief pops and cupcakes and all kinds of things. And so we had little kids, like my daughter, I made her a mask that was called Joy, because she doesn't have that same grief that we have, and what she has is pure unadulterated
Right.
joy. Like, she's here to show us that we can still be joyful, we can still, carry on, we can still choose love, we can still. And then, my son Grief Junior, he had his mask, and then, we just kept going and going and going. And like, we've been on a little break now, but sometimes I'll take my mask out into the neighborhood and just walk around, and folks, the way they respond is like, "What are you?" And adults will ask, "What am I?" Kids automatically just get it. They come up, they want to talk to me, they want to touch my face, they want to hug me, they want to, you know, engage with it. And other people are so creeped out, they're like, "Oh god, don't touch me, don't get near me, don't do anything." So even that is a commentary of how kids assimilate grief, and they're not afraid of it, they don't care. They're like, I have a big feeling somebody's gonna take care of it. And they will willingly play with grief,
Exactly.
willingly. They will willingly play with grief and not know,
I,
that that's what they're doing.
right. Well, and you said the right. You said it right. They're not afraid of it. They just don't have the words to express what they're going through, right?
Yeah.
And so when they see things like that, like you said, they just automatically get it. I
Hmm.
think the problem is that when adults see their image of grief, it's not that they're afraid of it, they're just afraid to confront it,
Hmm.
right? Because the conversation, that means that there's a conversation to be had.
Right.
Most of us out in this world, we're so used to not talking about the things that hurt us that
Hmm.
we tend to cover it up with things and pretend, like you said, put on a mask, pretend that we live in a happy world, although
Right.
that we're hurting. And I love the fact that you put on a mask and walk around like, no, this is what this grief looks like, right?
Yeah.
Don't run away from it. Come and let's have a conversation about it. Like you said, death cafes and things like that. I did my very first one. Didn't know what to expect, but I will
Yeah.
tell you, it was such an amazing conversation. I had one guy, he tuned in on the phone and he said, being a part of this made me realize how selfish I was with my family through everything I went through. It broke
Ooh.
me.
Ooh.
It did. It broke me, but it made me smile because he was like, "I'll be there." I said, "Okay, I love that. I love that right there." Now your podcast. Let's talk
Hmm.
about your podcast. When did you decide to do the podcast? Um, and so let's share that. What was
Oh
that
my
like?
gosh. Well, so again, I get directed to do things and make projects, and I had been thinking about we had entered quarantine, and so we couldn't really go out in the community and do a lot of the in-person work that we were doing. And so by
Mhm.
we, I mean, whoever I was wrangling to be in the shows with me. And so I'm always like, "Come, I have something for you to do. Put this mask on. Let's do this thing." And so it's kind of just what I do. And any of my friends will tell you, if any of them are listening, they will be nodding in like furious agreement about how I wrangle folks into doing things. And so I was sitting around, playing with some ideas. I was thinking about, okay, well, what can I make next? Or, where do I go from here? Because COVID took a lot away from us. Like, I was in the circus and we were doing all this in person work. So we didn't have that anymore, and the restrictions or whatever. So I had been, even before COVID was a thing. So back in January of 2020, my father dropped dead on January the 4th. So it was like this whirlwind of like, oop, my clock starts over, my grief clock. Holy, mm. And what do I do now? And so I had lost my dad, and that is like a whole complicated relationship that I am still working out, of unpacking my grief about it, 4 years later. And
Mm-hmm.
my work wifey Mickey, we've been friends for a real long time, and we had started having conversations like every week, and I eventually was like, hey, do you want to and she was like, well, I don't know, I was thinking of XYZ. And then she came up and she's like, well, what if we do a podcast? And I was like, cool, what if we call it Grief After Dark? Because the name had already came to me and I just didn't know what it was going to be. So
Right.
she's like, oh, I'm down. Let's do it. So we start scheduling time to sit together and push record, basically, of our conversations that we were normally having. And we never thought, like, oh, we
Mm-hmm.
could publish this for other people to listen to. This is just, her and I really just talking. And then we went through our first season, and you were on our second season, was it? Or was it our first season? I can't remember. But
I think it was the second season.
yeah, I can't remember.
I do
So
think it
it's
was the
been a
second season.
Yeah, so it's been a minute, but like we were looking for people to talk to, and I stumbled across your profile, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this dude's dope. Let's get him. Let's get Tony." And so we just kind of
And
we kind of
I
went from
had a
there.
blast talking with you guys, man.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
had
see, you
such a
kind
good
of
time.
you hit the airwaves and just went your own direction. I had a blast. It was a great time being on there. Where can people find the Grief After Dark?
Well, we're on Instagram and we are coming back for our fourth season. We just had our little production meeting, so we are going to be back for another season. We've had some incredible guests, so if anybody wants to be a guest, they can hit me up at Adventures of Grief Girl on Instagram. I have a Facebook page with Adventures of Grief Girl, but mostly I respond faster on DMs because I don't really check like other places. So I have things automated, so when it posts one place, it posts everywhere else, and stress I don't have to be under. You know what I mean? So
Understood.
uh,
Understood.
yeah, and we also have another podcast with another set of co-hosts, Teresa and Courtney, where we talk about the Pleasure Temple, where we talk about how grief affects lives, our part through with our partners and relationships and all kinds of stuff like that. So there's things that we can't. Grief After Dark is kind of PC, but not. This one is more an in-depth look at sexuality. It's a more in-depth look at like women's pleasure, and of course men are invited to have their say and all of these things. We like to leave room for that perspective. We can't give you a male's perspective. We can only speak from
Right.
who we are and what we've been through and our experiences. So you'll have to come on there too. You'll have to come on that one. And
Let me know. I mean, it sounds like look. This sounds like it'd be a great conversation. A little bit,
yeah,
R-rated and everything.
absolutely. It absolutely will be R-rated. Grief After Dark is also R-rated, but it's not explicit. So, um, but
Understood. I think it'd be a great conversation, right? I really do. I think it'd be a great conversation. And let me know. Let me know. We'll schedule
yeah,
it. I'll definitely be on. I'll
yeah,
go to my office that way. Like, and
yes.
we let people know, like, hey, kids don't need to be listening to this
Kids
right
don't
here,
need to
right?
be
You know what I'm saying?
listening to
Because
this.
I don't know
Yeah.
what y'all gonna be bringing to the table. I can only imagine, right? You got me nervous. You got me real
I'm
nervous
sorry.
about this conversation now.
Oh, we keep it 100 and we keep it raw too, because like it, and especially for us Black folks, like these are really conversations that we're not having in public. Like these are conversations, like we are inundated with these. Everybody's a relationship coach now, and they have no real life training. And so, it's a bunch of blind leading the blind, and we want to open it to be broader, to give people more of a more vulnerable and true, authentic space, rather than locking folks into these ideals. And like these are the only ideas that you can have. So, about grief and sexuality, and about being having pleasure, as a woman, or even the shame that men carry with the sexual pleasure. You know what I mean? So, like, it's not just, oh,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
all women are carrying all this shame. Like, there's damage been done to men too. So, like, we want to hear about that damage. We want to hear about how um we can support one another rather than degrade one another, rather than you ain't shit, and like, explain yourself.
Right. Right.
So we,
See,
we
I would
going pretty
love that.
hard. We going pretty hard, but
No, no, I
also,
would love that because, like I can't speak for all men, especially, like after the loss of my son,
hmm,
the things that I'm going to say, people may or may not agree with because they always have this misconception of how men react, right? You know what I'm saying,
yes,
after loss or something like that. And I can see it from both perspectives, but I think what I bring to the table, people are going to go, no, that would, yeah, I really, because
yeah,
honestly, I stopped craving it, right? You know what I'm saying?
right,
When my son passed away, I mean, there was a point where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get into a relationship, et cetera, et cetera. Then it
hmm,
just got to a point to where I'm not going to do it anymore. I
right,
I I don't want to, and I think that comes a lot from getting into this work, the thought of trauma bonding, right?
yeah.
And it took
And
me a minute to figure
you
that
and I
part
have
out.
talked about that
And
before
so,
too. So,
yeah, we talked about that, right?
hmm,
And what had ended up happening once I identified my role in people's lives and things like that, I had to start paying attention to the conversation that I was having with women. And
yeah,
I realized they wasn't here for me. They
hmm,
was here for what I was carrying.
hmm,
And so I had to start to set, I had to change my mindset when it came down to the physical intimacy part, right? And I had to be okay with the emotional intimacy and the mental intimacy, right?
you
And I
saying
had to be
it.
okay with that because for me, it was a matter of respect. I
Hmm,
started, with women that I was interested in, and I thought that was interested in me. The conversation was more of, oh man, I went through this, that, and the other. So once I started realizing that, I had to stop and step back, and I went, you know what? I would be a bastard if I took advantage of her.
right.
So I had to start
Well,
setting that boundary.
it's
I had
that
to let them know that,
self-reflection piece. Really,
right, it
really,
was self
really.
reflection, right?
It's
But
that self-reflection.
as a male,
Hmm,
right, right. So I mean, and so I bring a different perspective of how I receive my intimacy,
right.
just not in a physical sense,
Right. And
right?
so I think that
So, but that's a conversation.
that's so important for you to say, because again, I think the grief has uncovered that for you, and like, for you
Hmm.
to even acknowledge that for yourself, that, like, that's a huge part of moving with your grief. That's a huge part of moving with your manhood, and moving with, like, how you uh, interact with the world, going forward. So the choices that you make, and having learned that, most people aren't privy to this information, because they're not going through something that's taken or stripped them down bare, that they don't have a choice really but to be vulnerable about some things. And so, and a lot of people fight against that. So, like, they don't want to do that self-reflection, and like, and especially if they haven't gone anything, well, what would be the point of me going through self-reflecting if nothing's wrong? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But all the time it's raggedy as hell,
Right.
And so, and I
Yeah.
speak for
Yeah.
both. Like, it self-reflection is a big part of grieving. Like, it's a big part of grieving for both men, women, non-binary, trans, whoever, everybody. Self-reflection, I think, is at the
Yeah.
top of the list. So, you are
Yeah.
seeing, how do I see the world? You're reevaluating how you see everything. And so there's a lot that was broken and irreparable for me. Like, I can't repair this. And there was a lot of stuff I don't want to, like, I don't need it. Thank you so much. And so
Right. Well,
creating that
it's a
space.
matter of self-awareness too. Yeah,
Yep.
it's a matter
Yep.
of self-awareness, right?
Yep.
And again, when I'm on your show, we'll open the doors wide open and I'll share my side of it. I don't want to give too much away, but you got me to
Right.
thinking. I was like, man, when I say the things that I say, I can only imagine the criticism of how people may or may not react to it, right? But I'll also look at it and go, I don't understand what the importance of it is. And maybe, it comes from an aspect where I've seen where people have made this the important thing. I got to
Hmm.
have this, what I'm saying, to make me feel worthy and things like that. Whereas I bring the perspective of my self worth is not defined on the intimacy, the physical intimacy I may or may not receive from a woman, right?
This.
So, and that's a controversial topic anyway, right? Because you're gonna be like,
I
"What, Tony?" I'm like, "Yeah."
I
I
feel
actually
like for
I started thinking to myself,
a lot of
"Go
men,
ahead."
that is a very controversial thing because, well,
Mm-hmm.
let's get into it on the podcast because we're gonna sit here and talk all night.
Yeah, yeah, we'll definitely talk about it. See, we giving away some conversation here, and so I want people to tune in to that conversation that we have because I think it's going to blow a lot of people away, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
not your typical male, right? And I think this conversation is just going to be freaking amazing. So I digress.
I know. I
D,
know.
how can
And
people
and
find
this
you?
is what we do. We sit here and we'll talk for 2 hours and then where did the time go? where,
And
what
we would have had a whole other conversation about it.
yes.
So we go, yeah, we're not going to have that conversation right now. We're going to wait till I'm on your show because I think it's,
Yeah.
you'd be the perfect person. You and your crew be the perfect people to have this conversation with.
Yeah.
So how can people find you, D?
Like I said, Facebook, Instagram, Anaya on Facebook. That's my personal page. I don't have time to be having all 97 pages because it's just me, and I'm managing quite a few other things and people. And on Instagram at Adventures of Grief Girl and the Pleasure Temple. So the_Pleasure Temple. It's private. You have to let me know you've been invited to be accepted into the temple because of the nature of the work that we do. And it is explicit content. So be mindful. If it's not for you, it's not for you. That's okay. If you're not there yet in your grief journey. But what we really, really try to do is hold space for bereaved moms in particular. But we do love to have the dads in, and we love to have like the male perspective. So we will accept we will accept men into the temple, just know that. But we don't take everybody because people just aren't there a lot of the times. And so I do a lot
Yeah,
of, I ask people to moderate themselves because it makes my job a little bit easier, and then I don't have to be the hammer all the time.
right.
But anyway.
Understood. Now, I always ask the guest this: if you had some words to leave the audience right now, what would you leave them with?
um Try to find something to fall in love with it as often as possible, whether that's
Mm,
you know art, music, TV, things that generate love for you. Um, say yes as often as you can.
I love that. I love that. D, my friend, thank you for being on the show today. Wow, such an amazing person. I can't compliment you enough. You know this, and I think very highly of you. And
Oh, I feel
so
the
to
same
have
way
you
about you.
bless the platform today, I appreciate it. I'm humble, because you guys, ever since the time that I met you, we've always laughed. We had deep conversations. You take me there every time, get me in my feelings. And so
Right.
for everyone tuning in, hopefully you guys enjoy the conversation. As always, if you guys made it down to the end, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you be notified every time we drop a new episode. But also, if you know anyone that can benefit from these conversations that we have, do me a favor and share this with them. But also do me a favor, head over to Dee's channel, hit that subscribe button. Tune in to
Yeah.
those conversations because I'm telling you, her and her co-host, they be bringing it, man. And but also stay tuned for the conversations of the conversation that we're going to be having about sexuality and grief.
Yeah.
I think you guys are going to learn a lot. And tell D I sent you. All right.
Yes. Tell me Tony sent you, and we got you. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much.
You
Thank you so much.
guys enjoy. Yeah, you guys enjoy. So until next time, this is going to conclude another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Until next time, you guys be safe, keep your head up, and just remember, you're not walking this walk alone. Peace.